In this video, I'm going to talk about how you can take your image files from your SketchUp model and arrange them into a single sheet. So this is the 36-inch wide by 24-inch high sheet created in a Google Drawing. And the first things that I'm going to do before I get into adding content, we'll take a look at some of the settings. Just so you know, if you wanted to zoom in, it should default to fit when you first open it. But if you'd like to look at it, at a smaller scale, or rather a larger scale, you can change the zoom settings under View. Okay. Other things that I'm going to go back to fit. Just make sure they're set. Make sure that Show Ruler is check marked. Okay. This is the ruler up here. Each one of these little marks indicates ½ inch. And also for the guides, make sure you show the guides. Okay. So I have already created a 1-inch border all the way around, and I'll just show you how I was able to do this. You're going to left click into the ruler and drag a guideline, okay? And you can line them up using the rulers on the edge. So I've got a 1-inch border here on the left, top, right, and at the bottom, I've got two. Both of them are at 1 inch. I'm going to use the one section below here to add a title. So I will go to the text box here and make a text box the full width, and I can stretch it. I may need to adjust the size of it once I get everything in place. I'm going to go to the assignment sheet, and I'm going to Control-C, copy it to the clipboard, and then come back here and paste it in there. Oh, I may have to create that again. Well, now that I've got that text copied, and maybe I'll just place it in there and then Control-V. Okay, you can see it's quite small. I would recommend a font size of about 48 points. And then you can go and choose a font for that text. So I'm going to use one called Century Gothic, and I'm going to uncheck the bold button here. It's up to you how you'd like to do that. In my case, I'm going to center this text. Like I got a little number one here I'll get rid of. And I'm going to move it so it is centered on the sheet. And using the arrow keys to kind of more fine-tune the movement. Okay. And then obviously, instead of your name, you would put your name. All right. The next thing that you'll need to do is begin bringing in all of the images. Okay. There should be at least 11 of them. Based on the assignment description, you can go and check and make sure you've got them all. To bring them in, you'll go to Insert, Image, and Upload from your computer. And what I would suggest you do is just kind of scatter them around. You can put them on the sides. Basically, we need to sort of see how many there are and what's the best arrangement before we get into more precise location of those images. Okay, so I have inserted all 11 of the images, and I haven't really paid much attention to what's going where just yet. What I would suggest you do next is to sort of group them. Now, keep in mind that when you're doing a layout, the whole idea is to present things clearly and logically. So, if I was to use a layout like what you see here, it would be really difficult for a person to quickly kind of go and sort of understand the various images that are in the presentation and also get a sense of what this building or this structure is all about. So one thing you can start to do is to group them. That's one way of kind of creating some order out of things. So I've got these 4 elevation views, north, south, east, and west. And I can start to kind of pull them together. I've got a few of the sort of perspective scenes. I've got a roof plan and a floor plan, and I've got a couple of Paraline drawings. So maybe they don't take this they're not together like I have presented here on the screen, but it's some place to start. So the next thing I would sort of think about is, where, if you're doing one sheet, sort of the center of the sheet starts to take more importance than maybe the edges. So that could be a reason, why you place a certain image a certain way or in a certain position. The other thing is that you can use an image that you feel is stronger than the other ones and make it bigger. So you can use size as a way of kind of making something have more hierarchy. So it's a little bit subjective, but two goals are to make a powerful presentation, something that's visually dynamic, but also clear. Okay. So these images will need to be scaled and adjusted. As you can see, we have the SketchUp logo, and thank you, SketchUp, for providing the software for free. But for your presentation, you may want to sort of eliminate that from the images. So with the Google Drawing tool, you can crop the view. So if I go up to the menu bar here, there's a crop image tool, which would allow me to drag the corners closer to the image, and I can sort of remove the watermark. So you may find that you need to remake some of your images so that when you crop, it's not kind of cropping out things that you want to show. So I'll go back in here and crop. And the thing is too, if you wanted to expand the crop region, you can click on the tool and go back and, make it bigger. But basically, I want to leave a little bit of space around the images. And you'll notice that there's a little bit of texture to the background. So in this final layout example, I'm not going to create a background color. I'll just let this sort of gray tone and this kind of brownish tone. Also keep in mind that when you select the images that will be included in the layout, try to find the graphic style that is sort of consistent. So it looks like a single person put together the presentation. Right, so I'll go around and I will kind of crop all of them, and then I'll start adjusting the sizes. So for some of these views, like this one right here, for example, first of all, let me make it a little bit bigger and move it so it's clear of some of the other images. I feel like there's a lot of this foreground area, and I'm going to crop that out in addition to removing the SketchUp logo. So I'll click on the crop tool and I'll bring this closer. Oops, let me repeat that. I think I dragged it by the wrong way. Okay, so now I have, slightly less of that foreground, and maybe I want to bring it up even a little bit more. Okay, and then you can also change the size after you've cropped it. So I'll go around and repeat the process for all of them. For some of them, like these elevations, it's really important to maintain the same scale for them. So when it comes to cropping them, maybe I want to bring in a few temporary guidelines so that I can use them. Maybe I'll use, let's see here, I'll use the one that's already at the border here, and then I'll bring in another one. And I may end up changing the scale of these, but what I'll do is I'll use those guidelines to help make sure that all of them are the same size. Now remember, the platform that we started with was 200 feet. So I have a common reference. So I'm going to expand them so that the platform aligns with those two guidelines. Okay, it's almost there. You may have to zoom in a little bit. It's a little bit difficult to kind of control those, and you may not get them perfect, but if they're pretty close, that's okay. Okay, maybe I'll zoom in a little bit later. Okay, so I'm going to move some of these out of the way, and then I will start bringing these in and scaling them so they are the same size. Again, I'm using the guidelines to align the edges of the platform, not the overall image yet. I'll use perhaps those same guidelines to set a crop location. Okay, almost. And I'll do the same thing with the other two elevations. Okay, so as you can see, these guidelines are at the edges of the platform, roughly. Here, and then here, here, here. And this one needs to be brought in a little bit more. So I'll make that repair. So I've zoomed in a little bit, and I'm going to go and try to make that adjustment so that the left and right side of the platform has better alignment. Here we go. So that side and that side now align with the guideline. And I'll zoom back out to fit. Okay, now for the cropping portion, you can either move those ones or create another one, but basically what I'm trying to do is create a consistent edge dimension on both sides of the image. Okay, and now what I'll do is I'll use that crop tool. Click on the image, click on the crop, and drag them into those guidelines. Now, as far as the top and bottom dimensions, we'll work on those momentarily. And again, you don't want to scale them this time. You want to use the cropping tool to mask out some of those edge conditions. So I'll go to all 4 of these and repeat the same process that I'm doing right now. It wants to scale them, and I need to keep hitting Control Z and making sure it's only cropping them like so. Now for this one, I've zoomed in a little closer so I can make the adjustments. You can drag from the corners or from the side over here. So I'll get that aligned with my grid. And I'm going to just move down to this one on the bottom, and I'll also crop that one. Again, you can use these side grips or the corner grips. Okay. I'll zoom back out to fit. And the next thing I'll need to do is crop the top and the bottom. I don't need this much sky. What I would suggest you do is find a common dimension above and below that you use for all of them. So you may need to create a number of guidelines. For these ones that I kind of finished with, I don't need this one anymore, so I'm going to drag it back to the ruler. Same thing goes for these two. And you can kind of bring them in and remove them as needed. So for this part, I'm going to go, I'm going to zoom into about 100% here. And I will create some guidelines that allow me to kind of maintain consistency. Maybe I'll bring in a guideline that I'll then move the image up so the ground line aligns with it. And then I'll make, let's say, a 2-inch top border there. Now I may need to adjust this based on what's happening with the logo. Maybe I'll look for the one that has sort of the shortest one. Let's see here. Before I go through all the work of cropping it, so that should work for that one. This one here, bring in the guideline, and then come up a couple of inches. That one will work for that one. So 1, 2, 3, and let's see if this one should be fine too. Bring in a floor guideline. And then I will look for Another one to use for the top. Okay, now I can crop the tops all to align with that guideline. And I'm just trying to make some consistency between all of these images. And I'll do this for the tops, and then I'll repeat the process for the bottom. Okay, I'll bring in a guideline, maybe that's an inch deep. See if that's going to work for them. So this bottom line is going to give the region of ground fill below the ground line. And it's not critical that it's super precise, but just generally consistent. I'm missing one, 2, 3. Let's do this one. All right, and then I'll go back to fit. Okay. Now again, I may need to adjust the overall scale of those, but for now, those look to be about the right size. And I can take these guidelines and kind of drag them back up to the ruler and just bring them down if I need more. If you can, with your roof plan and your floor plan, make those the same size as the elevations. All right, so I've got a guideline here and here that I can use to size them. And if you scale down the elevations, you can also scale down the plans. You may find that they're all just a little bit too big. So this will take you some time. And one thing to just be cautious about, you notice how when I drag from the middle point, it affected the proportions. You want to avoid doing that. You want to be dragging these from the corners only so that they maintain the same proportions. Yeah, I think that these are going to end up being a little bigger than I need. But again, I can always scale them all down the same size if necessary. And another thing I can do is bring in those same guidelines to use as crop guidelines. So I'll click on the crop tool and I will drag these. I'll try to make roughly the same size border all the way around. Like so, and I'll do the same process for the floor plan. This one is the roof plan. Move that over there, bring this one in, scale it up, crop it, and try to align it with those same guidelines. If you're trying to work and you find that an image has passed behind another and you want to bring it to the front, you can click on the image, right click, and bring to front, or kind of just incrementally begin moving it backwards or forwards. Okay, now that one is also scaled. I'll just set it over there to the side and I'll begin working on getting the 3D images in and prepared for the layout. So when it comes to deciding where images go and which images to make bigger or smaller, it kind of depends on how much information they show. Like when I look at these two plans, it seems like they're not showing a lot of information given the amount of space they're taking on the page. Whereas maybe some of these perspective views you want to kind of highlight and give more importance to. So perhaps those get stretched to be bigger. And again, when you're stretching these, you want to make sure that you stretch from the corners. Now, if you notice, there's a little bit of an edge up there, so I can crop that out. Okay, but again, perhaps making those 3D views a little bit bigger would be more informative for someone who's viewing your sheet. But these ones, maybe since they don't provide a lot of information, you can scale them down. If I wanted to bring just those two and leave these the same size that they are, I could hold down the Shift key and scale them both at the same time. Okay, let's see, let me do that again. Looks like I may need to do them separately because, as you can see, they're scaling the proportions when you choose more than one. So that is not going to work. I'm going to undo that by hitting Control Z. And unfortunately, I think I'm going to need to drag them one at a time. And I may need to use some guidelines in here to sort of get those sizes to align like I had done before. But just, use caution when stretching. Be sure to stretch them if you can from the bottom or from the corner. So here's one possibility for a layout. I tried to make the 3D images, the perspective views, a little larger. One idea was to put them in the middle, but I didn't have enough room to get all the other drawings on either side. So I decided to shift them over to the left. One thing that I've tried to do is use these guidelines to create alignments. Maybe these need to come over, or I can use the background to form the alignment. So anyway, this is one possibility, and you could play with a few options with the arrangement. The last step will be to add text below each of the images. For the text, for the titles underneath the drawings, this one was a 48-point font, and that would be a little bit too big. You want to make that a little bit more important because it's the title of the whole sheet. I'm going to make them left aligned in this case. And this one, I'll put in the name of the drawing, which is View Toward the South. And you can use whatever name you feel like adequately describes the drawing. It's too small. I'm going to increase its size to 24-point font. And the other thing that I'm going to try to do is maintain the same relationship of my text to the image. Generally speaking, in architectural drawings, the text is going to be towards the left or centered under the image. So either one is acceptable. Sometimes you'll see a right alignment, but it's perhaps a little less common. But one thing that you want to try, if possible, to do is be consistent, again, so people can find the information that they need. So I use the copy tool to create copies of the titles, and I've arranged them so they have the same relationship to the images. You can decide whether or not to align with a line within the drawing or the actual crop edge. So in this image, the crop edge is a little further over than the text that I'm using. Another thing I've tried to do is to align the text across. So if I've got two images next to each other, I might try to put the text at the same horizontal line. And again, this is all just to make it clearer and easier for someone to find information. Now, once I've got the text all located into their proper positions, I can go and begin renaming the views. So I've gone around and I've renamed each of the views. One thing I would recommend is that if you have a roof plan and a floor plan, that you put the roof plan above. If they're next to one another, it's not as important, but if they're on top of each other like this, then it makes sense that the roof plan would be above the floor plan. In terms of the views, you could call them different things. I'm referring to the direction that we're looking, but you could say something like, view from ramp looking toward the north, or view from ramp from the south, something like that. So what you want to do is give them a title that's consistent and that helps the viewer kind of understand where those views are being taken. So I'm looking at a second version. This I've called V1.2, so for version 1.2. And my thought is for this one that I'm going to try making the elevations a little bit bigger so I can see a little bit more of that detail. And then I'll I'll adjust the sizes for everything else and see how that looks. So here's the version with the elevations below and just a couple of adjustments I would make. So what I tried to do here was just align everything with horizontals. There's a little bit more of a gap between the elevations and this row right here. So I'm going to move those up a little bit, kind of try to more evenly space them. Maybe move this row down a little bit. And perhaps this bottom one up a little bit, so I kind of get a little bit more consistent division between the different views. So this is another possibility in terms of arrangements, but you'll discover, depending on the sizes of the images that you have, that you may have to kind of come up with your own way of organizing the sheet. So this was an arrangement that I had done with a completely different visual style for all of the images. And one thing I'll mention is that to create that black background, I basically made a shape. And I filled it with black, and I made the edge the same color. If you wanted to explore this option, maybe will work with the images that you have, maybe not. If you wanted to try a color, I would just suggest that you try to find a color that's appearing in some of the other images. So again, there's some consistency to your presentation. If you don't like the sort of high contrast of the black background, you could also try working with one of the gray tones. But anyway, it just takes a little bit of trial and error and experimentation to find the one that's right for you. So that's it for this portion of the assignment.